Listen, I want to tell you something really important, and I promise this story is going to surprise you. You know when you think you've learned everything there is to know. Well, life has this funny way of teaching you one more lesson when you least expect it. And the story I'm about to share with you, well, it still makes me smile and shake my head every single time I think about it. So picture this. About 3 years ago, I was getting ready to fly from Los Angeles all the way to New York City. That's a really long flight across the whole country. Now, I've been working with airplanes and airlines for a very long time, and I've learned something super important. Flying isn't just about getting from one place to another. It's about treating every single person with kindness and respect, no matter who they are or what they look like. That's why when I put a lot of my money into an airline company and eventually became the person who owned most of it, I made myself a big promise. I promised that every passenger, and I really mean every single person who got on our planes, would be treated like they mattered. Because guess what? They do matter. Every single one of them. Now here's something really interesting about being successful. When you work hard and do well in life, you learn pretty quickly that you don't need to walk around telling everyone how important you are. You don't need a big flashing sign over your head that says, "Hey, look at me." I've always believed that the way a person acts tells you way more about them than any fancy title or job. So throughout my whole life, I've made a point to travel simply, just like a regular person. No big group of helpers, no special treatment, just me with my ticket like everyone else. Can you imagine that? Even though I owned the airline, I dressed like any regular person you might see at the airport. On that particular day, I wore comfortable jeans, a nice button-down shirt that wasn't too fancy, a light jacket, and my favorite old leather boots that I'd had for years. Nothing flashy or expensive looking, just comfortable clothes that were perfect for sitting on a plane for several hours. I had my first-class ticket in my hand for seat 2A, which was a window seat, and I was really looking forward to a quiet flight where I could read some work papers and maybe take a little nap. I always arrive at the airport early because my mom taught me when I was a little kid that being on time is super important, and that lesson stuck with me my whole life. So I got through the security checkpoint, where they check your bags without any problems, grabbed myself a cup of coffee, and walked to the gate where my plane would be boarding. Everything was running on time, which was great. When they announced that first-class passengers could board, I picked up my carry-on bag and headed down the walkway to the plane. Now pay attention to this part, because it's where things get really interesting. The moment I stepped onto that plane, I noticed this man right away. You know how sometimes you just get a feeling about someone the second you see them? He was standing in the aisle near the front of the plane, and even though I could only see his back at first, you could just tell this was someone who thought he was really, really important. He was wearing an incredibly expensive suit, the kind that probably costs more money than most families spend in several months. His shoes were so shiny you could practically see your reflection in them, like mirrors. His haircut was absolutely perfect, not a single hair out of place. And he wore this fancy watch on his wrist that sparkled every time he moved his hand, the kind of watch that's more about showing off than actually telling you what time it is. But here's the thing. It wasn't really his clothes or his watch that caught my attention. It was the way he acted, the way he stood there taking up more space than he needed to, the way he gestured impatiently at the flight attendant like she wasn't moving fast enough, the way he just seemed to think the whole world should revolve around him. You could practically feel the attitude radiating off him, like heat from a fire. I walked down the aisle, smiling and nodding politely at the crew members, and when I got to row 2, I stopped. And there he was, sitting right in my seat. Yes, seat 2A, the exact window seat I had carefully chosen when I booked my ticket several weeks before. He had his laptop computer open, his briefcase taking up the seat next to him, and he was typing away super fast on his keyboard, completely unaware that he was sitting in someone else's assigned seat. Now, I'm not the kind of person who likes to argue or cause problems. I never have been. In the movies I've been in, sure, my characters might handle things with a tough look or a clever line, but in real life, I believe in staying calm and treating everyone with respect. So I cleared my throat gently, to get his attention, and I said in a friendly voice, "Excuse me, sir. I think you're sitting in my seat." And you know what he did? Absolutely nothing. He didn't even look up at me. He just kept typing away on his computer like I hadn't said a single word. So I waited a moment, thinking maybe he just didn't hear me. The plane was filling up with passengers. People were talking. There was a lot of noise and activity. So I spoke a bit louder this time. "Excuse me, sir. This is seat 2A, and that's my assigned seat." This time he did look up, and oh boy, the look he gave me was something I'll never forget. It was the kind of look that said he'd already decided in half a second that I wasn't important at all. His eyes looked at my face with all its wrinkles from my years of life, then down at my simple, comfortable clothes, and back up again. I could see him thinking, sizing me up, and deciding I was nobody special, just some old man who didn't matter. "The seat's taken," he said in a flat, cold voice. Then he went right back to his laptop, like that was the end of the conversation. Just like that. No, I'm sorry. No explanation. No acknowledgement that maybe he made a mistake. Just 3 cold words, and then he acted like I wasn't even there anymore. I felt something inside me. Not exactly anger, because I've learned over many years how to control that, but something else. A kind of sadness about how people sometimes treat each other. Here was a grown man, probably very successful at his job, probably went to good schools, probably had lots of money, and yet he had zero basic manners or respect for other people. "I'm sorry," I said, keeping my voice calm and even, "but I selected this specific seat when I booked my ticket. I have seat 2A right here on my boarding pass. Perhaps there's been some confusion with your seat assignment." He let out this huge sigh, the kind of exaggerated sigh that's meant to tell you what a huge bother you're being. He snapped his laptop shut with a sharp sound and finally turned to look at me directly. "Look, old man," and I really want you to pay attention to how he said those words, "old man," with so much disrespect and contempt. "I'm not moving. I have very important work to do. I need this window seat for my presentation, and I don't have time for this nonsense. There are plenty of other seats on this plane. Why don't you just move to the back and find one there?" The back. He actually told me to go sit in the back of the plane, like I was some kind of second-class person who should just be grateful to be on the plane at all. Can you believe that? The flight attendant, a young woman whose name was Sarah, and I remember her name because of what happened later, had been watching this whole thing from the kitchen area at the front of the plane. She came over quickly with her professional smile, though I could see in her eyes that she was concerned about what was happening. "Sir," she said to the man in the expensive suit, "may I please see your boarding pass? We need to make sure everyone is sitting in their correctly assigned seats before we can close the door and take off." He waved his hand at her dismissively, like she was an annoying fly. "I'm in first class. That's all that matters. This seat is perfectly fine." "I understand, sir," Sarah said patiently, "but this gentleman has seat 2A assigned on his boarding pass. If you could please show me your ticket, we can find your correct seat." "I'm not moving." His voice got much louder now, loud enough that other passengers were starting to turn around and stare at what was happening. "I am a Platinum Elite member of this airline. Do you know how much money I spend on flights every single year? Do you have any idea who I am?" And there it was, that question that people who think they're super important always ask. Do you know who I am? As if that should matter. As if being rich or important should give you the right to take whatever you want and treat people however you want. Sarah stayed calm and professional, which was really impressive. "Sir, I'm sure we can figure this out quickly if you could just show me your boarding pass." He reached into his jacket pocket with an angry, jerky movement and pulled out his boarding pass, practically throwing it at her like a frisbee. She looked at it carefully, and I saw her expression change a little bit. She glanced at me, then back at him. "Sir, your assigned seat is 5C, which is a middle seat in row 5. This gentleman is correct. He does have seat 2A. The man's face turned bright red, like a tomato. "That's impossible. I specifically booked a window seat. I'm not sitting in a middle seat like some regular economy passenger. You need to fix this right now." "I apologize for any confusion, sir," Sarah said, still maintaining her composure, which means she stayed calm and professional even though he was being really rude. "But according to our computer system, you're assigned to seat 5C. All the other window seats in first class are already taken by other passengers. If you'd like, I can check to see if there are any seats available on a different flight later today." A later flight. He stood up so abruptly that for a moment, I actually thought he might try to physically push someone. "Do you have any idea what I have riding on this trip? I have a meeting with investors in New York that could make or break a $50 million deal. I need to work on this flight. I need this seat. And some old man who probably got his ticket on discount isn't going to ruin this for me." There was this moment of complete silence. Everyone in first class was watching now. Other passengers sitting in their seats, flight attendants who had stopped what they were doing. Everyone just frozen, waiting to see what would happen next. It was like time had stopped. I could have told him right then and there who I was. I could have pulled out my identification card, could have quietly explained that I wasn't just any regular passenger. But something inside me didn't want to do that. Maybe it was pride, or maybe I was just curious. I wanted to see how far this would go. I wanted to see if this man had any decency buried somewhere under all that arrogance, any ability to just be a kind human being. "Sir," I said quietly and calmly, "I understand you're under a lot of pressure. Business can definitely be stressful, but this is my assigned seat. I arrived at the airport on time. I did everything right, and I'm simply asking you to move to your own seat. That's all I'm asking." He actually laughed. It was this short, barking sound that had no joy or humor in it whatsoever. "You know what your problem is, old-timer? You're from a different generation. You don't understand how the world works today. It's all about efficiency, about making things happen, about getting results. People like me, we drive this whole economy. We create jobs for other people. We make big deals happen. We move billions and billions of dollars around." He looked me up and down again with disgust. "And people like you, well, you're just in the way. You're slowing everyone else down. I've been insulted many times in my long life. When you work in Hollywood making movies, when you run businesses, when you just live life, you develop what we call thick skin, which means insults don't hurt you as much anymore. But there was something about this particular insult that really bothered me. Not because it hurt my feelings personally, but because of what it represented. This attitude that some people matter more than others, that having money and a fancy job gives you the right to treat other people like they're invisible, like their feelings and dignity don't count for anything. The airplane captain had been told about the delay, and he came out of the cockpit where the pilots sit. He was an experienced pilot who had been flying for many years, someone I'd actually met a few times before, though he didn't seem to recognize me in my casual clothes. "Gentlemen," he said in a firm, no-nonsense voice, "we need to solve this problem right now. We're delaying the flight, and that affects everyone on board. Sir," he said directly to the man in the suit, "you need to move to your assigned seat immediately, or I'm going to have to ask you to get off this aircraft completely." "You're going to throw me off the plane?" The man's voice was full of disbelief and outrage. "Do you know how many flights I take with this airline? Do you realize that I could make one single phone call and have your job taken away? I know people very high up in this company. Very high up." The captain didn't even flinch or show any concern. "Sir, Federal Aviation Administration regulations, which are the rules that all airlines must follow, require all passengers to be in their assigned seats. This isn't something we can negotiate or change. You have exactly two choices. Sit in seat 5C, your assigned seat, or leave this aircraft. You have 60 seconds to decide." For what seemed like forever, the man just stood there, clearly trying to figure out what to do, probably thinking about whether he could really afford to miss this flight and his important meeting. Finally, with a look of pure hatred in his eyes, he grabbed his briefcase and laptop computer and pushed past me, deliberately and roughly bumping my shoulder as he went by. "This isn't over," he muttered under his breath as he passed. "You just made a very, very big mistake, old man." He threw himself into seat 5C with so much force that the passengers sitting on either side of him actually leaned away, looking uncomfortable and a bit scared. He sat there absolutely radiating fury and anger, his jaw clenched tight, his fingers gripping the armrests so hard his knuckles turned white. I settled into my seat, my correctly assigned window seat, and pulled out my phone to send a quick message before we took off, and I had to turn it off. Sarah came by a few minutes later and very quietly apologized for what had happened. "Please don't worry about it at all," I told her with a genuine smile. You handled that situation beautifully. You were professional and calm under pressure. That's exactly the kind of excellent service I like to see from our flight crew. She seemed really relieved by my words and thanked me warmly before moving on to finish all the things flight attendants need to do before takeoff. The plane took off smoothly, and we were on our way to New York. I did try to work on my documents and papers, but I kept glancing back toward row 5. The man was working intensely on his laptop, occasionally making phone calls during the times when electronic devices were allowed to be used. His voice carried through the cabin even though he was clearly trying to speak quietly. I could hear little pieces of what he was saying. Incompetent staff. Completely unacceptable treatment. Filing a formal complaint. Someone is going to pay for this. About an hour into the flight, after the flight attendants had served everyone their meals, I decided it was time to do something. I pressed the little call button above my seat, and when Sarah came over, I asked her quietly if I could please speak with the head flight attendant and the captain when it was convenient for them. A few minutes later, I was invited to come to the small area near the cockpit at the very front of the plane. The head flight attendant, whose name was Michael, and Captain Rodriguez were both standing there waiting for me. Is everything all right, mister? Michael glanced down at his electronic tablet, where he could see my ticket information, and I saw his eyes suddenly get really wide as he recognized my name. Then he looked at my actual face more carefully, and complete recognition washed over his features. Oh my goodness, Mr. Eastwood. I'm so terribly sorry about what happened. I didn't realize it was you. I held up my hand to stop him. Please, no apologies are necessary at all. You couldn't have known who I was, and honestly, that's exactly how I prefer to travel. But I wanted to ask you about the passenger sitting in seat 5C. Has he made any formal complaints yet? Captain Rodriguez nodded with a grim expression on his face. He's demanded to speak with me twice already. He wants to file official complaints against Sarah, against you, against the airline itself. He's threatening lawsuits and saying he's going to make sure everyone involved loses their jobs. I nodded slowly, taking this information in. What's his name? Michael checked his tablet. Marcus Thornton. According to our records, he's listed as a Platinum Elite member, which means he flies with us very frequently. He flies with us quite often for business purposes. Mr. Thornton, I repeated, thinking about that name, and he really does fly with us on a regular basis. Yes, sir. About twice a month, according to his flight history, usually in first class, and typically between Los Angeles and New York or Chicago. I thought about this for a moment. Here was a man who spent a considerable amount of money with the airline that I owned, who flew regularly and should have been exactly the kind of loyal customer we valued and appreciated. But he was also someone who treated people, both staff members and fellow passengers, with complete contempt and disrespect. He represented something I'd spent my entire business career fighting against, the terrible idea that having money gives you the right to be cruel to others. Here's what I'd like to do, I told them, and both Michael and Captain Rodriguez leaned in to listen carefully. When we land in New York, I'd like you to arrange for Mr. Thornton to be met by our airport services staff. Tell him that his complaint has been taken very seriously, and that senior management would like to speak with him immediately to address all of his concerns. Bring him to the airline's executive lounge at JFK Airport. Can you arrange that for me? They both nodded, looking curious, but maintaining their professional demeanor. Absolutely, sir. We can arrange that. And please make sure that Sarah knows she did absolutely nothing wrong. In fact, I want her to receive a commendation, which is like a special award, for her professionalism under very difficult circumstances. Please make a special note in her employee file about how well she handled this situation. Yes, sir. Absolutely. We'll take care of that right away, Michael said with obvious relief in his voice. When we finally landed at JFK Airport in New York, I gathered my belongings and was one of the first passengers to leave the plane. I made my way quickly through the airport to the executive lounge, which was a special, comfortable space that I'd actually had completely redesigned just last year to be more welcoming and pleasant for important guests. I asked the staff members working there to prepare the small conference room and to bring Mr. Thornton there as soon as he arrived. Then I sat down and waited, thinking about what I was going to say. About 20 minutes later, I heard voices outside in the hallway. The door opened and Marcus Thornton strode in confidently, still wearing that incredibly expensive suit, still radiating that same self-important attitude. But now there was also this look of satisfaction on his face. He thought he was about to watch people get fired from their jobs. He thought justice, his version of it anyway, was about to be served. He stopped short, completely surprised, when he saw me sitting there alone at the conference table. "What are you doing here?" he demanded in an irritated voice. "I'm supposed to be meeting with senior management about my complaint." I gestured calmly to the empty chair across from me. "Please, have a seat, Mr. Thornton. I'm not sitting down with you. I'm here to file a complaint about you, among several other people. Where's the manager? I need to speak with a manager right now." I stood up slowly and walked over to a small table on the side of the room where there was a water pitcher. I poured 2 glasses of water, brought one back, and set it down in front of the empty chair. "Mr. Thornton, my name is Clint Eastwood. You might know me from movies and television, but that's not the important reason I'm here today. I'm here because I own this airline. I'm the majority shareholder, which means I own most of the company. I'm as senior as management gets. There's nobody higher up than me to complain to." I've seen a lot of different expressions on people's faces during my many years as an actor and director. I've watched people portray shock, disbelief, fear, embarrassment, every emotion you can imagine. But nothing I'd ever seen on a movie screen quite matched what happened to Marcus Thornton's face in that exact moment. The color completely drained from his cheeks, making him look almost white. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound came out. His expensive briefcase slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a loud thud. You're... He stammered, unable to complete a sentence. "Yes," I said simply and calmly. "And before you say anything else, I want you to listen very carefully. I mean really, truly listen, because what I'm about to tell you is more important than your $50 million deal, more important than this flight, more important than whether or not you get to keep your platinum status with this airline." I sat back down and waited patiently until he, moving like a person in a dream who can't quite believe what's happening, slowly lowered himself into the chair across from me. "You called me old man today. Twice, actually. You told me to move to the back of the plane, like I was somehow less important than you. You treated me like I was completely worthless, like my time and my dignity meant absolutely nothing compared to yours. And you know what? If this had just been about me personally, I probably would have let it go and forgotten about it. I've been insulted many times before in my life. I'll probably be insulted many more times in the future. At my age, that kind of thing doesn't bother me too much anymore." I took a sip of water and continued, looking him directly in the eyes. "But here's the thing. It wasn't just about me. You treated Sarah, a flight attendant who was simply doing her job correctly and professionally, with complete contempt and disrespect. You dismissed Captain Rodriguez, a highly skilled man with 30 years of flying experience, like he was nobody. You made every single person sitting in that first-class cabin feel uncomfortable and awkward with your behavior. And you did all of this because you truly believed, deep in your heart, that your money, your status, and your important business deal gave you the right to treat people this way." He tried to open his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished yet. You said something earlier that really stuck in my mind. You said that people like you drive the economy, create jobs, make big deals, and move billions of dollars around. And you're probably absolutely right about that. I'm sure you're very, very good at what you do. I'm sure you are genuinely important and successful in your field. But here's what you clearly don't understand. None of that, not one single bit of it, gives you permission to treat other human beings like they're beneath you or worth less than you." I leaned forward, making sure he could see how serious I was. "Do you know why I travel the way I do? Why I don't surround myself with assistants and handlers and people whose job is to clear the way for me everywhere I go? It's because the moment you start believing you're more important than everyone else, the moment you start thinking that the rules don't apply to you, that's the exact moment you stop being a decent human being. That's the moment you lose something absolutely essential about what makes us human and what makes life worth living." The silence in that room was so profound you could have heard a pin drop. Marcus Thornton sat there in his expensive suit that suddenly seemed like just a costume, his confident attitude completely and totally shattered. When he finally found his voice and spoke, it was barely above a whisper. I honestly don't know what to say. That's actually a good start, I told him. Not knowing what to say is much better than saying the wrong thing with complete confidence. Now, let me tell you exactly what's going to happen next. First, I said, counting on my fingers, Sarah is going to receive a formal commendation and a nice bonus in her paycheck for her professional handling of a very difficult situation. Captain Rodriguez is going to get a letter of appreciation for his strong leadership. Every single staff member who witnessed what happened today is going to know that their dignity and their professional judgment is valued and protected by this airline. They need to know that we stand behind them. He nodded slowly, his face pale, clearly waiting for the punishment he knew was coming. As for you, Mr. Thornton, I have an important decision to make. I could ban you from ever flying with us again. I could revoke your platinum status immediately. I could make absolutely sure that every airline in our partnership network knows exactly what happened today and how you behaved. And believe me when I say this, part of me really wants to do exactly that. His face had gone from pale to completely ashen, like all the life had drained out of him. But then I surprised him. But I'm not going to do that. Do you know why? Because I believe that people can change and grow. I believe that sometimes we need to be shown our absolute worst selves to really see who we've become before we can start becoming better. Today, you were shown your worst self in a way you'll never forget. The real question now is, what are you going to do with that information? How are you going to grow from this experience? I pulled out a business card from my pocket and slid it across the smooth table to him. This is the contact information for our customer relations department. But you're not going to use it to file a complaint. You don't get to do that. Instead, you're going to use it to issue apologies. I want you to write personal, heartfelt apologies to Sarah, to Captain Rodriguez, and to every staff member who was affected by your behavior today. And I mean real apologies, not the fake corporate kind that lawyers write to protect companies from lawsuits. I want apologies that show you genuinely understand what you did wrong and why it was wrong. He picked up the card with hands that were visibly shaking. Second, I'm going to suspend your platinum status for 6 months. During that time, you're going to fly just like everyone else does. No special treatment, no priority boarding, nothing. Maybe that experience will give you some perspective. Maybe it'll remind you that every single person on every single flight is someone's father or mother or son or daughter. Every person is someone who matters to somebody. I understand, he said in a hoarse, broken voice. Third, and this is absolutely the most important part, so pay very close attention. I want you to think really hard about that $50 million deal you're working on. Think about all that money, all that prestige, all that success you're chasing. Then I want you to ask yourself this question. If you get absolutely everything you want professionally, if you become as rich and successful as you've always dreamed, but in the process you become the kind of person who treats others with contempt and cruelty, what have you really achieved? What kind of success is that really? I stood up and walked slowly to the door, then turned back to look at him one final time. You know what I've learned in my many years on this earth, Mr. Thornton? The true measure of a person, the thing that really counts, isn't their bank account or their job title or how important their business deals are. It's how they treat people when they have absolutely no obligation to treat them well. It's how they act when they think no one important is watching them. You failed that test completely today. But here's the good news. You're getting another chance. Most people don't get the kind of wake-up call you just got. They go through their whole lives never realizing how they affect others. Don't waste this opportunity. Use it to become better. I opened the door and left him sitting there alone in that conference room with his thoughts. The rest of my business trip to New York was pretty uneventful and normal. I had my meetings, took care of my business responsibilities, and flew back home a few days later. But I made a point of checking in with our customer relations department the following week to see what had happened. Marcus Thornton had sent those letters I'd requested. Real ones, apparently, according to the staff members who received them. Not fake, corporate-sounding apologies, but genuine ones. He'd acknowledged his terrible behavior, apologized without making excuses or trying to justify what he'd done, and even included personal touches in each letter that showed he'd actually taken time to think about what each person had experienced because of his actions. 6 months later, when his platinum status was officially reinstated and he could have all his privileges back, he sent me a letter directly. I still have that letter somewhere in my office. In it, he explained that that day on the plane had been a genuine turning point in his life, a moment that changed everything. He wrote that he'd been so intensely focused on success, so completely driven by competition and ambition and the desire to win, that he'd lost sight of basic humanity and kindness. He'd started going to therapy to work on his issues. He'd reconnected with his family members, who he'd been neglecting for years, while he focused on his career. And he'd made significant changes in how he ran his business, treating his employees with much more respect and dignity, and actually caring about them as human beings rather than just workers. I don't know if those changes lasted forever. I genuinely hope they did. I'd like to think that sometimes, when we're confronted directly with our worst behavior and really forced to see it clearly, we have the courage and strength to become better people. So what's the big lesson I took away from this whole experience? Listen carefully now, because this is really important. Respect isn't something you earn through having money, or a fancy status, or impressive achievements. Respect is something that every single human being deserves simply by virtue of being human, of being alive, and having feelings and dignity. The old man sitting in the economy section, the young flight attendant serving drinks and snacks, the pilot flying the plane safely through the sky, the businessman in the expensive suit, we all, every single one of us, deserve to be treated with basic dignity and respect. And for all of you out there who have achieved success in your lives, who have money or power or influence over others, please remember this. Those things are privileges, not rights. Having them doesn't make you better than anyone else. If anything, they make you more responsible for how you treat others. Because at the end of the day, when absolutely everything else is stripped away, all the titles and job positions, all the money in bank accounts, all the accomplishments and awards and recognition, all we really have is how we treated other people during our time on Earth. That's the legacy that truly matters. That's what people remember about us after we're gone. So here's what I want you to remember. The next time you're on an airplane, or in a store, or anywhere else where you're tempted to use your status or position as a weapon to get what you want, stop and remember this story. Remember that you never, ever know who you're actually talking to. That old man in simple clothes might own the airline, but way more importantly than that, he's a human being who deserves respect. That flight attendant might be someone's daughter, working hard to support her family. That person sitting next to you might be going through the hardest day of their life. Every single person you meet is fighting some kind of battle you know nothing about. Every person has a story, has feelings, has dignity that deserves to be honored. And the beautiful thing is, treating people with kindness and respect doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't make you weaker or less successful. In fact, it makes you stronger and more genuinely successful in the ways that really matter. Think about the people in your own life. Think about your teachers at school, the people who serve you food at restaurants, the people who help you at stores, your classmates, even people you might not particularly like. Every single one of them deserves to be treated like they matter, because guess what? They do matter. Their feelings are just as real and important as yours. Their time is just as valuable. Their dignity is just as precious. And here's something really cool that I've discovered. When you treat people with genuine kindness and respect, especially people who don't have the power to do anything for you in return, something amazing happens. You become a better person yourself. You feel better about who you are. You sleep better at night, knowing you made the world a little bit better instead of worse. And often, that kindness comes back to you in unexpected ways. Maybe not from the same person, but from somewhere. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, but what if someone is being really mean or unfair to me? Don't I have the right to be mean back? And here's what I'd say to that. Of course you have the right to stand up for yourself. Of course you should assert your boundaries and not let people walk all over you. But there's a huge difference between standing up for yourself with dignity and strength and treating others like they're worthless. You can be firm and clear about your boundaries while still treating the other person like a human being. In that situation on the plane, I stood up for myself. I didn't just slink away to the back of the plane like I was told to. I calmly but firmly insisted on my right to sit in my assigned seat. But I didn't insult the man back. I didn't try to humiliate him in front of everyone, even though he was certainly trying to humiliate me. I maintained my dignity, and in doing so, I maintained his too, even though he didn't deserve it at that moment. And that's the kind of strength that really matters. Not the strength to overpower others or make them feel small, but the strength to remain kind and decent even when others aren't. The strength to treat people with respect even when they're not treating you that way. That's real power. That's real character. So as you go through your day today and tomorrow and all the days after that, I want you to carry this story with you. When you're standing in line somewhere and getting impatient, remember it. When someone is going slower than you'd like and you're feeling frustrated, remember it. When you see someone who looks different from you or dresses differently or speaks differently, remember it. When you're tempted to judge someone based on how they look or what you think you know about them, remember it. Remember that every person you encounter is exactly that. A person. A whole, complete human being with feelings and dreams and struggles and dignity. And remember that how you treat them says everything about who you are and absolutely nothing about who they are. You have the power, right now, today, to make someone's day better or worse. You have the power to lift someone up or tear them down. You have the power to be the kind of person who makes the world a little bit kinder or a little bit crueler. That's an enormous power that every single person has, regardless of age or wealth or status. What are you going to do with that power? Are you going to use it to make yourself feel big by making others feel small? Or are you going to use it to lift others up and, in the process, become the kind of person you can be truly proud of? The choice, my young friends, is entirely yours. And you get to make that choice fresh every single day, in every single interaction you have. Make it count. Make it matter. Make it something you can look back on with pride. And always, always remember, respect costs nothing but means everything. Kindness takes no extra time, but can change someone's entire day, or even their entire life. And treating people with dignity, especially when you don't have to, when you could get away with being mean or dismissive, that's when your true character really shows. So be the kind of person who treats the janitor with the same respect as the principal. Be the kind of person who says thank you to the bus driver and means it. Be the kind of person who holds the door for others and smiles at strangers. Be the kind of person who stands up for those who can't stand up for themselves. Be the kind of person who makes others feel valued and seen and heard. Because at the end of your life, nobody's going to remember or care about how much money you made, or what job title you had, or how many likes you got on social media. But people will remember how you made them feel. They'll remember your kindness or your cruelty. They'll remember whether you lifted them up or put them down. They'll remember whether you treated them like they mattered. Make sure those memories are good ones. Make sure your legacy is one of kindness and respect and human decency. Because that, my friends, is what truly matters. That's what makes a life worth living. That's what makes you truly successful, not in the eyes of the world, but in the way that counts most, in your own heart and in the hearts of those whose lives you touch. So go out there and be kind. Be respectful. Be the person who treats everyone with dignity. Be the person who makes the world a little bit better just by being in it. Be the person who remembers that we're all in this together, all just human beings trying to make our way through life. And we all deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. That's the lesson. That's the story. That's what I hope you'll remember and carry with you always. Now go out there and make it count.